Hey, something that we're in this series called Be Grateful. You can guess what it's about. It's about being what? Grateful. There you go. That was a little more energetic. So one of the things I'm super grateful for is I was sitting over in this area and I saw the soup collection, and our goal was 600, and you guys brought in more than 800, which is awesome. That is for the local food pantry here in Batesville. Way to go. Way to go. Thank you for your generosity in that regard. So as you came in here today, there's a big jar over on the table, and then there are also a bunch of little jars. Now, we gave the little jars away last week, and if you weren't here, make sure you grab one, and we want to encourage you to be grateful around your table at dinner or before bed or wherever it is. But then there's a big jar where you can be grateful here because, it doesn't just stop at home. And so I just pulled out a couple that I thought I'd share with you. These are from you all that you stuck in the big jar. My family. I'm grateful for phones. Who wouldn't be? This is my favorite one, puppies. Puppies. A church that knows our community needs hope. Thankful for the church feels like family. Isn't that awesome? Man, way to go. Be grateful. Continue being grateful. I don't know if you know this, but this year, the Thanksgiving season is actually about the longest that it can possibly be because Thanksgiving is always the fourth Thursday, and the fourth Thursday is as late as it can be. So we get actually even like an extra week of being grateful during this season, and so we're super excited about that. And I think it's important to talk about gratitude should extend beyond just this season, hopefully year-round, and hopefully we're setting us up to do that. So one of the things that just kind of fascinates me and at the same time blows my mind is the big shift that takes place on Thanksgiving Day. You know what I'm talking about, where we enter this, Thanksgiving table or celebrations with family or football or whatever it is that you do, and there's this whole I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful, and we sit around the table eating and all that good stuff. And then in a matter of hours, we turn into this thing. Now, some of you are thinking, Seth, that's not even real. That's just a meme. And you're right, that isn't real. So let's take a picture, let's take a look at a picture that is real. There we go. That is real. Trampling people to get your favorite television. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's an amazing shift that takes place within hours, within minutes of being thankful. We just turn into this hateful people. So I think it's important to spend some time learning and focusing on being grateful because we have so much to be grateful for. And this is kind of my big contention, and I hope I kind of make the point by the end of the time today and throughout this series, and that's that gratitude is a spiritual issue. Gratitude is a spiritual issue. Whether you consider yourself a spiritual person or a Christian person, I promise you, gratitude is a spiritual issue. In fact, if I brought you into a room somewhat like this and said there are two groups of people, they're sitting on opposite sides of the room, there's a group over here, and they are just the biggest group of complaining whiners who are so annoyed. They're talking about, we had snow this week, and it's only November, how ridiculous, and these chairs are hard, and I don't like this, and my job stinks, and our car's broken down, and whatever else, and they're just complain. And I'm not saying that's all you people. Just imagine with me. And then over on this side, you've got a group of people who are just so thankful, and all they talk about is, man, I'm so glad we have our roof, that we have heat, even though it's snowing and record cold temperatures. It's warm in here, and I'm so thankful, for my job, and I'm thankful that I have, a grocery store where I can get whatever I want whenever I want it, and I said to you, you get to choose which group you want to go to. Would you look at me and say, this is ridiculous, this is the dumbest thing you have ever asked me to do? Or would you say, wow, thank you for giving me a choice, I'm going to go with these people over here, right? Because gratitude, you get it. We don't gravitate toward haters, we gravitate toward people who are grateful. And gratitude is a keystone habit in your life. A keystone habit is a habit that influences every other aspect of your life. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but grateful people tend to be happy. Grateful people tend to easily forgive other people. Grateful people are enjoyable to be around. We like being around grateful people. It is a spiritual issue. I got to thinking about, we talk sometimes about the beginning, creation, Adam and Eve, and I got to thinking about what if Adam and Eve had approached God with gratitude? They're placed in this beautiful paradise, and God gives them purpose. He says, I've got a job for you. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to fulfill it. You can take care of this beautiful paradise that I've given you, this planet. I want you to live it up. And I've given you relationship with myself. You get to have a relationship with me, the God who gave you breath and who gave you life. And Adam's like, and you gave me a wife and sex. I mean, that's even better, you know? And I mean, he's got all this good things. And what if they had focused on being grateful? But instead they looked at something that they were missing. They focused on something that they felt God had inadequately given to them. Because God, you put us here, but then you gave us this rule. And then you said, you know, you're not allowed to eat from that tree. Forget all the ones we are allowed to eat from. We're going to complain about the one that you told us not to touch or not to eat from. He didn't say don't touch it. What would our world be like if Adam and Eve had opted to be grateful rather than hateful and complaining? I have to believe personally our world could be in a different place. And so the truth is for all of us, if we can focus on gratitude, if we can move our hearts in the direction of gratitude, it can become a keystone habit and we can have an impact and an influence on those around us, but it also is a spiritual issue in our own lives. Now today, we're going to talk about a word that you don't necessarily tie to gratitude, or you generally may not think of it in this way. I think it's really tied to ingratitude or being ungrateful, and I hope I can kind of make my case by the time we're done here today. And it's the word inadequate. It's the word inadequate. I want to ask you a question. When is the last time you felt inadequate? When's the last time you felt inadequate? Now, I would argue there are times when we all feel inadequate. Sometimes it's at work. Never forget my first job out of college. My parents were so proud of me. I got a 4-year degree, and then I worked at Best Buy selling digital cameras, right? That was money well spent. And not that there's anything wrong with working at Best Buy. That's not a slam on anybody who works Best Buy. But anyway, so I got this job, and I knew nothing about digital cameras. This is in the early days of the internets, and you couldn't like Google anything you wanted. And the lady who hired me was like, oh, we'll train you. We'll teach you everything you need to know. And then people would ask me questions, and they didn't train me, and I had no idea. And I felt so inadequate, and I felt so stupid when they would ask me questions. And so I complained about it, right? Because I felt inadequate. There are times we just feel personally inadequate as parents. Have you ever felt inadequate as a parent? I mean, my goodness, parenting is so hard. And dealing with discipline of kids and trying to deal with stuff that they go through at school, or they bring math homework home, and you're like, I don't even know why they teach this in school. I couldn't tell you. And we just feel so inadequate. Sometimes we feel like our resources, the things that we have, are inadequate. Our finances, we don't have what we want to be able to provide for people, or take the vacations we want to have, or buy, you know, whatever it is that we want to buy. Sometimes we feel like our skills are inadequate, or our ability to meet needs are inadequate. I mean, you look at poverty, you look at the drug problem in our culture, and we just think to ourselves, I don't have what needs to be done here. And so then, you know, you move in the direction of complaining because it's frustrating and we don't know exactly what to do. We all have moments of feeling inadequate. But here's the thing that I want to focus on today. As I said, feeling inadequate is really tied to a lack of gratitude. And there is an important spiritual lesson in this, and that Jesus taught his disciples as they dealt with inadequacy that they felt as a certain situation came up. So there's an important lesson, I think, for all of us to learn. If you're new to Bible study, we're going to take a look at a miracle that Jesus performed. And my guess is you've heard of this miracle before. I think pretty much everybody in our culture has heard of this miracle before. And if you are not new to Bible study and you're familiar with this, you may, you know, have a tendency to check out. But what I want to invite you to do is lean in a little bit and allow this story to hit you maybe in a new way as you learn about this concept of gratitude, and as we learn together this concept of gratitude and inadequacy. Now, as I mentioned, it involves Jesus' disciples, and if you're not sure what a disciple is, it's kind of like a protege. The disciples would follow a teacher or leader, kind of like a life coach, right? And they would travel around with their life coach, their teacher, leader. They would learn what he had to say. They would listen. This was a very common thing 2,000 years ago. So the disciples were, particularly there were 12 of them who became apostles, but then there were dozens of other disciples who traveled around. But this involves the 12 disciples, the 12 apostles that were closest with Jesus. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, but the privilege that these guys had of traveling around with Jesus and seeing firsthand God redeeming the world. I mean, it was really remarkable. They had an opportunity to see what God was doing to change the world view, to change the God view, the people's understanding of who God is. And one of his ways of doing this, one of Jesus' ways of doing this for his disciples was to send them out on mission trips, to send them out to do ministry. And so on one occasion, he sent them out 2 by 2 to go into communities. He said, don't take anything other than the clothes you're wearing. Go wherever people will welcome you. Stay in their homes. If they don't welcome you, keep moving on. But here's what I want you to do, Jesus would say. I want you to tell people to turn to God, repent, turn in the direction of God. I want you to cast out demons. I want you to anoint people. I want you to heal people. And so they went and they did this. And afterward, they came back. And as you can imagine, if you've ever been on a mission trip before, it's exhausting. Staying in people's homes, doing the work of God over time, it's just tiring. And these guys, when they came back from their mission experience, they were worn out. And so that's kind of where we pick up this story, because they come back to Jesus, and Jesus is helping them debrief everything that they've been through. And he kind of addresses this whole concept of inadequacy that they were experiencing and feeling. So Mark chapter 6, and in case you aren't aware of this, Mark was good friends with Peter, it's believed. And so when you read through this, essentially you're reading the account of Peter, who, if you grew up Catholic, you were probably taught Peter was the first pope. I mean, Peter was the man. He was the head of the early church. And so we're reading Peter's account, which is kind of cool when you think about it. So here's what he says, Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. So they have this debriefing time to make sense of the experiences that they've had. And then Mark, through Peter probably, tells us, then, because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have a chance to eat. Now think about this, because Jesus was like reaching celebrity status. He's like a minor Jewish celebrity at this point in time. And people, they're hearing about the healings, they're hearing about the miracles, they want to be around Jesus. And so crowds were constantly just inundating Jesus everywhere he went. And so it was so busy that there wasn't even a chance to eat. So Jesus said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. It's time for you to get some rest. Now, this is kind of a side note. I think it's interesting that Jesus didn't say, put your AirPods in and, zone out. He said, go to a place of quiet. Just be away and just be present. Rather than being distracted, don't go to a noisy place. Find a place of quiet for rest. So, verse 32, they went by themselves in a boat to a solitary, which in Greek means desert, a desert place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So you can just imagine, these guys are worn out, they're tired. Jesus says, okay, the crowds won't leave us. Get in the boat, we'll go across the water. But everybody sees him, and they recognize Jesus, and so they run around to go meet them. It's like the welcoming party on the other side. And you're looking at this, if you're one of the disciples, you're like, oh my goodness, would these people just leave? Now, those of you who are parents, particularly of young kids, moms maybe especially, my guess is you have a sense of what the disciples were experiencing. Because there are little people pawing you all day and pulling on your shirt and asking, Mommy, pay attention to me and whatever else. And finally, they're all kind of entertained, right? Whether it's in front of television or they're playing nicely for the first time, And you think to yourself, I can finally go to the bathroom. And you go, you shut the door, and you think, 5 minutes, that's all I want is 5 minutes. And within like 15 seconds, you hear some crash in the other room or somebody, knocking on the door, or some paper being slipped underneath, trying to get your attention. You're like, for the love, leave me alone. Give me a break. I need rest. I have to believe that's what the disciples were feeling. But Jesus, being the sensitive leader that he was, he saw all these people in need, and he sees an opportunity. And the disciples see another sermon coming. They're like, seriously? Isn't one enough for the day, right? You're like, how much longer is this going on? They're like, great, we get another sermon. We get another sermon. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them. That means he felt love for them. He had a pity for them. And here's why. Because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. So they go to this desolate place trying to find rest, to regroup. But this group who has no hope, this group who has no leader, this group who has no direction, they show up. And Jesus starts teaching and teaching and teaching. And the disciples start getting irritated. In fact, I mean, they're probably tapping their sundials, and like, what the heck, Jesus? We are exhausted. I have heard this parable 30 times. I don't want to hear it again. I mean, they got to hear everything he taught. And so it was frustrating. And no doubt they're kind of grouping together and they're trying to figure out, okay, who's going to have the courage to talk to him? Who's going to tell him, we're done, Jesus. It's time to move on. We're done. Here's what happened, verse 35. By this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Translation, we're tired and we're hungry, which means we're hangry. You know, hangry? Hungry, angry, all at the same time. I mean, Jesus, could we do something here? And I know you didn't ask us this, Jesus, but you should have done you should have sent these people away to begin with, but you didn't. And so now we're kind of in this place. And so, Jesus, we have a solution. Here's our solution. Send the people away. That's what you should have done to begin with. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat, because we're hungry and they're hungry and everybody's hungry and we're tired and it's late, and this was our time. This was our time, Jesus. So now let us get some rest. And Jesus, being the caring, compassionate leader that he was, he responded and he said, you give them something to eat. Now, we can't always see everything that was in the Greek, but this was in the imperative tense, which means it was not like a suggestion. It wasn't like, hey guys, I hear you, you're right. What do you think about, maybe we should try and provide dinner for all these people. This was yeah, I hear you, why don't you go ahead and feed them then? And I can only imagine what they were thinking in these moments. Because I think they were kind of annoyed with Jesus. And you know how sometimes our first response is our most honest response? What we're going to read next is like the snarky response of the disciples. And there aren't a lot of snarky comments in the Gospels, but I think this is one of them. And I don't know for sure, I wasn't present for it, but when you think about all that they were experiencing, their exhaustion, they're just, oh my goodness. And then Jesus is like, go ahead and feed them. And so look what they say in response. They said to him, that would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much money on bread and give it to them to eat? I mean, do you want us to ride our camel 5 minutes down the road to the store, Jesus? Is that what you're expecting us to do? And spend half of our year's income, which, by the way, we don't even have? I mean, do you want us to empty our coffers to feed these people? And what about our time? This was supposed to be our time. We are exhausted. And there's, some cultural things that are going on here, because in a desert place, the villages in the desert weren't that big, and as we're going to find out later, the crowd was 5,000 men plus women and children. The towns were 3,000 people. So I mean, there wasn't a town that could feed all these people. It's like, Jesus, there's no electricity here. There's no Motel 6 that's going to leave the light on. There's no convention center. I mean, what are you thinking? This is so stupid. How could you ask us to do such a ridiculous thing? Could you just be real? Now see, the disciples, they saw a need. We're hungry, they're hungry, let's do something about it, but we don't have the ability to meet this need, and so we're frustrated, Jesus, that you're even asking us to do this. And they saw their inadequacy, they saw their lack of food, their inability to meet this need that Jesus was saying, hey, I want you to do something about this. And they did what most of us do when we feel inadequate. We complain and gripe, and we come up with the reasons of why this was a stupid idea. You want me to do what? You want me to work with children? I mean, there's a need with children, and you want me to hold babies, but they cry. I mean, I don't know what to do with babies. You want me to do what job? I mean, I don't even have the skill. I don't have the time. I mean, do you see how busy we are? Do you know what kind of toll that would take on our family? You want me to give what % of my income? Are you joking me? I mean, do you have any appreciation for what we go through and what I go through and what I deal with? And I'm not even called to do this. I mean, I don't even care about these people. I just want them to go home so I can eat. And Jesus, he looks at them, he says, quit telling me about what you don't have and tell me what you do have. He answered them, you give them something to eat. And then he said, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. Now, I could be reading into this. I'm envisioning their eyes rolling as he says this to them. Are you kidding me? Now you want us to go like poll all 5,000 people when it's already, past dinner time, and you want us to go ask what food there is? I mean, my guess is they made kind of a grumbling, half-hearted attempt, because with 5,000 people, you would expect there to be some kind of food there. But here's what they come up with. When they found out, they said, five, Jesus, and 2 fish. That's what we got, Jesus. We told you this was a stupid idea, so why don't you just send the people home, please? Verse 39, then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. And so here's what happened. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he said, God, you really stuck it to me this time. I have all these to feed, and you only gave me 5 little loaves of bread, and we're not talking about big, fat American loaves, but little tiny loaves, and 2 lousy pieces of fish. What am I supposed to do with this? How could you ask me to feed these people with so little? Now, we've all felt that before, haven't we? Obviously, Jesus didn't actually say that. We've all felt that before. When we feel so inadequate, you want me to do what? You want us to do what? No. What are you thinking? And our excuses, they focus on what we don't have. But Jesus said, let's give thanks for what we do have. And here's what happened. Here was what really happened. He says, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave, what's that word? Thanks. He gave thanks. And he broke the loaves, and then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. Now, I got to wondering, what is it that Jesus prayed in those moments? And we don't know for sure what Jesus prayed, but there was a table prayer that was common to Jewish meals at this time period. And here's the table prayer, which I think is kind of cool. The table prayer is this: praise be to you, O Lord our God, King of the world, who makes bread to come forth from the earth, and who provides for all that you have created. Now, my guess is you know how the story goes. And you know that those 5 loaves and that those 2 fish, they were not inadequate. In fact, they were more than adequate. They were not insufficient. It was more than enough. Remember, the crowds came and Jesus looked at them and said, these are like sheep without a shepherd. And do you know what a shepherd does? A shepherd cares for the needs of the sheep. And our understanding of inadequacy, I really believe, is tied to our understanding of who the shepherd is. Now, 1,000 years before Jesus came, Israel had a shepherd king whose name was David, and David had been a shepherd boy as a kid. And he wrote one of the most beautiful things as he understood the importance of a shepherd. And here's what he said. You're probably familiar with this too. Psalm 23. He said, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack, what's that say? Nothing. Nothing. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack no thing, nothing. Nothing in my life is inadequate. Because when I have placed myself under God's care, I trust and I believe that he provides for me all that I need. A good shepherd cares for the needs of his sheep. Now, how many of you would say what I have is enough, that I'm adequately cared for, that I lack nothing? That's kind of our problem, isn't it? We look at life and we say, I lack all this. And we've got our laundry list of things that we lack. But here's the question, is if you feel you lack something, is it because God didn't provide you with what you need? I mean, really? In our culture of much, is it possible that you do have what you need? Is the problem with God or is the problem with us? See, here's what I think Jesus was doing. I think he was refocusing his disciples and saying, yeah, you're never going to have enough. That's not the point. The point is you have me, and me, along with whatever you have, is enough. Because I provide for you. I am the good shepherd who looks out for the needs of his sheep. So what if you could give thanks to God for what you do have rather than complaining about what you don't have? Because we do have so much. I got to thinking about this. I mean, we have more time-saving devices than any culture in the history of the world. Cell phones, cars, microwaves, dishwashers. We have robot vacuums. I mean, come on. And how many of you, you can be honest here, how many of you have ever said, I just need a few more hours in the day? There are cultures who would look at us and say, I wish I had the free time that you have. I wish I didn't spend all day doing the laundry. We still do, even with washing machines. But nonetheless, the point is, I mean, there's so much. There's so much. We have so many comforts. We are the most comfortable culture in the history of the world, and yet we complain when it snows outside. It's like, well, we've got cars with dual climate controls. Actually, 3 climate controls, because the back gets their own little climate control. I mean, we have so much. We have so many resources, so much wealth. I mean, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. So what if we could choose to be grateful? What if we could choose to be grateful rather than coming up with our laundry list of things that are inadequate in our minds? I don't have the skills. I don't have the talents. I don't have the time. I'm too busy. I don't have the resources. I don't have the finances. I've got excuses. Here's what happened in the story. Verse 42, Mark tells us that they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. Now, I don't think it's any coincidence that Jesus changed these 5 baskets to 12 baskets. That way, each one of his special disciples could walk away with their own gift bag, parting gift as they left, as a reminder of, listen, what you have is enough. What you have is enough. Give thanks for what you do have. Stop complaining about what you don't have, because what you do have is me. And I am always enough. If I ask you to do something, if I move your heart to do something, I will provide whatever it is that you need. So be grateful that you are sufficiently provided for. Trust me and quit complaining about what you don't have. I got to tell you, I started thinking about, I've been in ministry for 16 years now, which is kind of hard to believe. And I just believe God is taking every one of us on this journey of learning to trust him. And a big piece of that is taking steps in his direction to say, what I have is enough. What I have is enough. I'm going to take a step in his direction and trust him with what I have rather than complaining about what I don't have. And when I do that, when men and women do that, my experience is God shows up. And they begin experiencing miracles every day in their lives. Think about what was hanging in the balance for these 12 guys. In these moments. I mean, God, literally, the most significant event in the history of the world was taking place in their lifetimes. And they're sitting there in the desert, and God's like, and Jesus is saying, feed them, and they're saying, well, I don't have enough. And I mean, they could have thrown their hands up and said, I'm done. I am done. I am tired of these ridiculous requests. I'm tired of you demanding all this stuff from me and wanting all, we just need rest. We need break. This is about us. This is our me time. And if they had gotten on their camels and marched out of the area, do you know what they would have missed? Do you know what they would have missed? Something incredibly significant. But instead, they got to experience it. And I'm telling you, I believe God wants the same thing for you, and he wants the same thing for me. But it comes when we choose to be grateful and be thankful for what we do have rather than complaining about what we don't have. I was reflecting on the men and women that I have known in my lifetime, and particularly just because of everything going on here, all the construction that's taking place. And you may not know this, we've been in a REACH initiative, a generosity initiative as a church. And we've been inviting people over the last several years to be grateful and be generous and give thanks and to invest into what God's doing through our church to minister and care for those in our communities, to give hope to those who need to have hope. And there are all kinds of excuses we could have made, people could have made. Well, I've got these financial priorities, I've got these things going on, I've got, yada, yada, yada. I mean, we've got all kinds of excuses. But there is a group of men and women who said, I'm going to invest and I'm going to trust God and I'm going to be grateful for what I have and trust him with it. And as we end in this season, I just think about what God has done through us. In Greensburg, which you don't have the privilege of seeing every week, I mean, we have new classrooms for kids. We have a new nursing mom's room. We have a new foyer, or updated foyer. We have an updated cafe area. Here in Batesville, we're a month away from finishing this construction, which has nearly killed us, but we're almost there, and I'm grateful. We're almost there. I mean, it's going to be awesome. December 22nd is our first service upstairs, and I just think, what would we have missed out on? What would we have missed out on if we didn't trust, if we didn't say, look, this is what I got, God. I don't know if you can do anything with it, but if you can, I'm offering it to you. I'm trusting it to you. And in the process, we experience a miracle of God's presence and his multiplication of resources and provision in ways we never expect. And in the process of that, we can be grateful. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, last week, if you were with us, you got a gratitude jar. And there are still some more over there if you didn't get one. And what I want to encourage you to do this week is to think about an area of your life where you feel inadequate. Maybe you feel resourced inadequately. Maybe you feel your time is inadequate to do what it is that maybe God might be leading you to do. And what I want to invite you to do is to give thanks to God for what you do have. And then offer it to him. And see what he might want to do in you and through you. Because there are 12 guys who walked away with a basket full of fish and bread, not because they had it, but because God provided amazingly for it. And he wants to do the same thing in your life, but it requires a step of trust. It requires a step of faith. It requires handing it over to him and saying, I'm grateful for what I have. And so I invite you to take this and do what you want to do with it. Let me pray for us. God, what an incredible account. I know it's easy to talk about. It's a little harder to live out because the truth is we do feel inadequate. We have moments where we just feel like what we have isn't enough. And Lord, would you help us to look at you as our good shepherd who cares for all of our needs? And then would we faithfully, as you lead us, would we faithfully trust you with those things that maybe feel inadequate to us? Would we follow as you lead? And would we see you show up in our lives? Lord, I'm so grateful for our church and for the construction going on, for the people who have been sacrificial and generous in allowing this to take place. I am so grateful for how you want to use this postage stamp spot in Batesville, Indiana to make a difference in our communities and across the globe. I'm thankful for all of those things. Lord, would you lead us to a place of deep gratitude for all that you have done for us? You are the most generous giver I have ever known. And for that we say thanks. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.